The rain had been falling for hours, steady and cold, drumming against the roof like an old clock running out of time. Jacob Miller stood by the sink hands around a chipped mug of coffee that had gone cold long ago. His house was small, made of wood, that sighed with every gust of wind. From the back bedroom he could hear the soft, even breaths of his 10-year-old son. Ben always slept better when it rained. 3 knocks broke through the storm. Not loud, not frantic. Measured, almost polite. Jacob froze. The storm swallowed everything again, wind-rain silence. Then came another 3 knocks, softer, desperate. A woman's voice followed, hoarse and trembling. Please, I just need somewhere dry." His stomach tightened. No one ever came up this mountain at night, not in weather like this. He set the mug down, crossed the creaking floor, and unlatched the door. A woman stood there, soaked to the bone, rainwater streaming from her hair. Her breath came in short, ragged bursts. She looked like someone who had run for miles. Jacob didn't move. "Please," she whispered again. Her voice was small, but her eyes were sharp, too alert for someone merely lost. On her finger glinted a ring. Even in the dim porch light he saw the engraving. It looked like a military insignia. He should have sent her away. But something in her voice, exhaustion, maybe faith, made him step aside. "Come in." She entered without a word. Her shoes left wet prints on the old wood floor. The smell of wet earth and gasoline clung to her. Jacob handed her a towel and an old blanket. "Dry off. You're shaking." "Thank you." Her voice was barely there. He poured fresh coffee. The percolator hissed a sound that filled the silence. She sat at the small table, gripping the mug as if it might keep her alive. "What's your name?" he asked. "Anna," she said after a pause. "No last name. You from around here?" "No," she murmured. "I was driving north. I got turned around in the storm." Her answer was too quick. Jacob knew lies when he heard them. He'd been lied to, plenty, by the people who'd called his wife's death an industrial accident. He looked at her trembling hands. That ring caught the light again. The sound of rain filled the spaces between them. From the bedroom came a soft cough. Jacob turned toward it, automatically heart-clenching. "Your son?" she asked. "Yeah, Ben." Her voice softened. "He's lucky, having someone who still opens the door for strangers." Jacob said nothing. He just stared at the fire in the stove until it spoke for him. Minutes passed. She stopped shivering, though her shoulders still carried something heavy. Her eyes followed the flames, and when she finally spoke again, her voice carried that same strange mix of fragility and strength. "I didn't mean to bring trouble," she said quietly. "Then what did you bring?" She looked up at him, and for a moment he saw not fear, but defiance. Truth. The kind that gets people killed. Jacob frowned. Before he could ask, she touched the ring on her finger, twisting it nervously. It clicked against the mug. What's that supposed to mean? But she didn't answer. The clock on the wall ticked. Outside, wind clawed at the windows. The house moaned. Jacob felt the air tighten like the seconds before a storm breaks. He walked to the counter, switched on the old radio for background noise, a habit he'd never quite lost. Static filled the room, then a low male voice broke through. "Breaking news tonight. A federal investigation is underway after classified files were stolen from Hale Energy Corporation. Authorities believe the suspect may be traveling through the northern Oregon mountains." Jacob's eyes drifted to her. She sat perfectly still. The only sound was the faint scrape of her chair against the floor and the slow, audible hitch in her breathing. The suspect is described as a woman in her 30s, last seen wearing a dark jacket and a gold ring bearing a military emblem. Anna's hand clenched the mug. "Turn it off," she said sharply. Jacob didn't move. The voice continued, smooth, relentless. "The individual is considered extremely dangerous and may be carrying stolen government data." "Turn it off," she shouted. Jacob clicked the dial. The room went silent again, except for the rain and their breathing. He stared at her. "Who are you, really?" She swallowed hard. Someone who trusted the wrong people. That's not an answer. She met his eyes. If they find me here, you and your son are in danger. The words landed like stones. He thought of Ben asleep in the next room, the boy who'd already lost too much. He thought of the letter the company sent after his wife's death, cold words signed by a machine. "What did you do, Anna?" Her lips trembled. "I tried to tell the truth about hail energy, about what they've been dumping into the rivers. I was collecting proof when they came for me." Jacob's jaw tightened. The name hit him like a hammer. Hail Energy, the company that had taken his wife and called it a tragic accident. "You're lying," he whispered. "I'm not." She took the ring off and set it on the table. It made a dull, heavy sound. "Everything's inside. I hid what mattered." He looked down at it. The ring was ordinary, yet something about it seemed wrong, too deliberate, too polished. "Inside," she nodded. "It's not jewelry. It's a vault." Before he could ask, she stood. "I shouldn't have come, but I didn't have a choice." Her voice cracked. "If they find me here, they won't just take me. They'll erase you too." He stared at her, trying to decide whether to throw her out or lock the door. The storm rattled the walls. "Stay the night," he said, finally surprising even himself. "Tomorrow we'll figure it out." Anna's eyes softened for the first time. "You don't even know me? I know the sound of someone who's run too far," he said, "and I know lies when I hear them. Yours aren't lies, they're fear." She sat back down, exhausted. "Then God help you, Jacob Miller, because they'll come looking." He didn't answer. He just stared at the ring, at the tiny emblem glinting in the low light, and thought about all the things buried under silence. Outside, thunder rolled over the mountains. Inside, the house waited, listening. And somewhere in the distance, beneath the sound of the storm, an engine roared to life. The storm hadn't moved on, it had only grown quieter, heavier. Rain turned to mist, wrapping the cabin like a secret. The night had stopped roaring, but it hadn't stopped watching. Jacob sat by the stove, feeding small pieces of wood into the orange heart of the fire. He listened to each crack and pop as if the house itself were whispering. Behind him, Anna's wet clothes hung near the stove, dripping softly. The scent of smoke pine and something metallic filled the air like the taste of blood in the back of your throat after a long run. Anna sat cross-legged on the floor, wrapped in his old flannel blanket. Her hair was still damp, her eyes unfocused, fixed somewhere far beyond the cabin walls. "Coffee's getting cold again," Jacob said quietly. She didn't answer. Her hands were clasped together, her thumb brushing the empty space where the ring had been. The ring now sat on the kitchen table beside the half-empty mug. Jacob's eyes drifted to it every few seconds. That small circle of gold had changed the air in this house. It wasn't jewelry, it was gravity. "You said that ring's a vault," he finally said. "What does that mean?" Anna lifted her head. The firelight caught her face, softening the exhaustion but not the fear. "It holds data. Micro-storage inside the band, hidden in the metal itself. No one's supposed to know it exists. Data from Hail Energy," he said, testing the words. Her breath caught. "You remember that name? Everyone in this valley remembers it." His voice sharpened, then faded to something flat and dangerous. "They poisoned our water 6 years ago. Said it was a containment failure. My wife worked cleanup. She was dead within a year." The room filled with silence thick enough to choke on. The fire hissed as if in sympathy. Anna looked into the flames, her voice shaking now. "I know. I found the reports. The leaks weren't accidents. They were deliberate cost-cutting decisions. I was trying to expose them." Jacob stared at her jaw tight. "You expect me to believe that the same company that took my wife's life now wants yours?" "They don't just want me," she said. "They want the evidence gone. And She stopped, swallowed hard. "I didn't run because I was guilty. I ran because I was right." He studied her face the way her eyes trembled but never looked away. She wasn't lying, or if she was, she'd lived with the lie long enough to bleed for it. From the back room, Ben stirred. A faint creak, a soft cough. Jacob turned instinctively, half rising, then stopped himself. "You woke him," he muttered. Anna shook her head. "I didn't mean he cut her off. He's had enough people come and go." The boy's voice floated down the hall. "Dad." "Who's talking?" Jacob exhaled. "Just someone passing through, Buddy. Go back to sleep." The boy mumbled something and turned over. The door creaked shut. Jacob's shoulders eased, but his heart hadn't slowed. Anna watched him carefully. "You're raising him alone, since he was 4. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I didn't mean to," he raised a hand. "Don't apologize for what you didn't break." For a while, the only sound was the slow breathing of the fire. Then Anna whispered, "You still wear your wedding ring." Jacob looked down at his hand, the silver band dulled from years of work and time. He twisted it once unconsciously. Some promises don't end when people do. Her eyes glistened. "Then you understand why I couldn't walk away. Someone has to tell the truth even when it costs everything." Outside, the wind shifted. It carried a faint hum, a vehicle engine distant, but approaching. Jacob stiffened. Anna's eyes widened. "They found me." Jacob grabbed his coat, moved to the window. Through the slats he saw a faint beam of light sweeping across the tree's headlights. 2, maybe 3 cars on the dirt road. "You said no one knew you were here," he whispered. "They shouldn't," she said, voice breaking. Unless they track the ring." Jacob turned sharply. "Tracked it. You brought something that can be traced into my home. I didn't think. That's the problem, isn't it?" His voice was low but furious. "You didn't think. You just ran. Now my son's in this." Anna's hands trembled. "I can fix it. I'll go. Right now. We're into the woods. You'll freeze before dawn." She looked at the door, then back at him, eyes burning. "I'd rather freeze than get you killed." He moved closer, his anger colliding with something else, fear, maybe empathy. He wanted to believe she was the enemy, but she looked too much like someone who'd already lost everything. "Sit down," he said finally. "We'll wait it out." They both watched the faint lights dance beyond the trees, then fade. No knock, no siren. Just rain returning to its rhythm. Jacob let out a long breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Maybe they were just passing through. Anna shook her head. "They don't pass through. They hunt." She stared into the fire voice hollow. "I thought I could protect people by telling the truth. But the truth, it's heavier than I expected. It crushes everyone it touches." Jacob sat across from her, elbows on his knees, eyes on the flames. "Yeah," he said quietly. "It does." The fire crackled. Somewhere in that sound they both found something they hadn't heard in a long time, understanding. Anna looked at him, her voice barely a whisper. "You think I deserve whatever's coming, don't you?" He thought about it. About his wife, about the long years of silence that followed her death, about the people who looked away when truth got inconvenient. "No," he said finally. "I think you're the first person who's tried to make it right." She blinked hard. "That's not how they'll see it." "Maybe not," he said. "But the thing about storms, they always end. Doesn't mean the world's clean after just quieter." Anna smiled faintly, a small, tired thing. "You talk like a man who's made peace with ghosts, only the loud ones." The room fell quiet again. The fire softened to embers. Jacob leaned back, watching her head dip, her eyes flutter shut despite her best effort to stay awake. For the first time since the knock, he let himself breathe. Then, just as his eyelids grew heavy, something outside cracked. Not thunder, not wind. Wood splintering under pressure. Jacob's head snapped up. Anna was already awake, her face pale. He grabbed the rifle from behind the door, motioning for silence. Every breath in the house seemed to hold itself. Through the rain, through the whisper of branches, came a sound, low, deliberate footsteps circling the porch. Anna mouthed, "They found me." Jacob raised a finger to his lips. The fire hissed softly like a warning. Then, from the darkness, a man's voice, calm, too calm. "Miss Pierce, you've made quite a mess." Jacob's blood ran cold. The rain had stopped sometime before dawn, but the silence it left behind felt wrong. Heavy. Watching. Jacob stood at the window, the first gray light sliding across the valley. Steam rose from the soaked ground like ghosts trying to leave. His hands gripped the edge of the sink hard enough to turn his knuckles white. Anna Pierce was gone. The blanket she'd used lay folded on the couch. Her coffee mug sat empty on the table, and next to it, the ring. The same small gold circle that had changed everything. He picked it up. It was cold, heavier than it should have been. He turned it in his fingers, saw the faint military insignia glint, and heard her voice again. "It's not jewelry. It's a vault." He didn't open it, not yet. His stomach twisted as he looked around the cabin. The front door latch hung loose wet footprints leading to the porch fading into the mud. Outside, the world had gone strangely still. The trees dripped quietly. The road was empty. But Jacob knew the sound of engines when they'd been there, the rumble that didn't belong, the faint smell of oil and exhaust lingering like a warning. Behind him, the floor creaked. Ben stood there rubbing his eyes, hair sticking up in soft curls. "Dad." "Why are you up so early?" Jacob forced his voice steady. "Couldn't sleep. Where's the lady?" "She left." Ben frowned. "Did she say goodbye?" "No," Jacob said quietly. "She didn't." He turned toward the stove, started water boiling out of habit, though the idea of food made him sick. The kettle hissed, and for a moment the sound filled the house the way Anna's breathing had last night, fragile but alive. Then a voice cut through the air, tinny and sharp, coming from the small radio above the counter. "Breaking news this morning. CNN has obtained footage of investigative journalist Anna Pierce accused of stealing confidential files from Hale Energy Corporation." Jacob froze. The radio crackled. "Pierce is believed to be traveling through the northern Oregon mountains. Authorities are asking residents to remain vigilant. The suspect is considered dangerous and may be armed. One witness, identified as Jacob Miller, is believed to have assisted her escape." He dropped the mug he'd been holding. It shattered on the floor. Ben flinched. Dad Jacob turned off the radio, every nerve burning. "Go get dressed, bud." "Why? What's going on?" "Just do it." The boy obeyed, sensing something wrong. Jacob stood alone in the kitchen, staring at the ring still resting in his palm. He felt the heat rising in his chest, not fear, but fury. They'd taken his wife now, they were coming for his name. Outside, the low hum of tires on gravel broke the morning quiet. Then came another, then another. Jacob stepped to the window and saw them, 3 vehicles crawling down the narrow road toward his cabin. Black SUVs, their paint gleaming like oil. He whispered a curse, grabbed his jacket, and shoved the ring into his pocket. By the time the first SUV stopped in front of his porch, Ben was standing beside him, confused but trusting. Jacob placed a hand on his shoulder. "Stay behind me, no matter what." The car door opened. A man in a dark suit stepped out, holding a badge in one hand, sunglasses in the other. He smiled, but it wasn't the kind of smile that reached the eyes. "Mr. Miller," he called. "We'd like to ask you a few questions." Jacob didn't answer. He could feel Ben's small fingers clutching his sleeve. The man took a step closer. "A woman named Anna Pierce was seen here last night. You wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you?" Jacob's jaw tightened. "She stopped by. Needed shelter. I didn't know who she was." "Interesting," the man said smoothly. "Because according to this morning's report, she's a federal fugitive. And according to the footage, she didn't just stop by." He held up a phone. On the screen, Jacob saw a blurred image of himself at the door, Anna's wet silhouette behind him. It must have come from a drone or a long-range camera. "How did you—" The man cut him off. "Public interest, Mr. Miller. People like stories, and this one's already spreading." The words hit harder than any threat. From down the road, a local truck slowed to watch. Another neighbor stood at the edge of his fence phone in hand, pretending not to record. The valley was waking up, and the story was already out. "Look," Jacob said carefully, "I didn't do anything wrong." The agent's smile didn't change. "That's not my call." Behind him, another man opened the SUV door, taking out a camera marked Press. Jacob realized they weren't all law enforcement. Some were reporters. The circus had begun. Mr. Miller, the agent, continued, "You can make this easier. Tell us where she went." Jacob met his stare. "She left before dawn. That's all I know." The man sighed, slid his sunglasses back on. "You're a mechanic, right? Live quiet, keep to yourself. That kind of life depends on people not asking questions. So here's my advice, don't make yourself interesting." He turned and walked back toward the car. Cameras clicked. Ben's voice trembled. "Dad, why are they saying those things about you?" Jacob knelt beside him, gripping his shoulders. "People believe what they want, Ben. But the truth doesn't stop being true just because it's outnumbered." The boy's eyes filled with confusion and fear. "Are we in trouble?" Jacob forced a smile that hurt to make. "No, buddy. We're just in the storm again." When the cars drove away, they left deep tire tracks in the mud. The house felt smaller somehow, the air heavier. Jacob stood in the silence, the ring burning cold in his pocket. He pulled it out, turned it over. The seam in the metal was almost invisible, but he could feel it under his thumb, a thin line, a secret begging to be opened. He hesitated. Once he saw what was inside, there'd be no going back. Then the decision made itself. He fetched a screwdriver from his workbench, pried at the edge of the band. The top shifted with a faint click, revealing a hollow core. Inside, barely visible, was a tiny chip, smaller than a grain of rice. He set it on the table, heart pounding. This was what they wanted. A voice in his memory whispered, "They killed her for less." He slid the chip back into the ring, closed it, and tucked it deep into the lining of his jacket. Outside, the valley was waking birds, calling wind, stirring through wet pines. But the world had changed again. The quiet life he'd built was gone, replaced by a story too big to hide from. He looked toward the mountains where the clouds still hung low. Somewhere out there, Anna Pierce was running for her life. And now, so was he. The day passed in a haze of noise and whispers. By afternoon, Jacob Miller's name was already a headline. "Local man shelters fugitive journalist." The newsreader's voice echoed from every radio. Possible accomplice in the theft of corporate data. He shut it off. The sound of his own name twisted in his stomach like poison. Ben sat at the kitchen table, pushing cereal around the bowl, not eating. "Dad," he said softly, "are they going to take you away?" Jacob forced a steady tone. "Nobody's taking me anywhere." But he wasn't sure. The phone had rung all morning. Neighbors asking questions that weren't really questions. People who'd waved to him yesterday now locked their doors when he passed. He needed answers, and the only thing that had them was still in his pocket. That night, when Ben was asleep, Jacob took the ring from his jacket. It gleamed faintly in the lamplight. That same military insignia. A symbol of order, protection, and now deceit. He turned it slowly, remembering Anna's words. "Everything's inside." He reached for his old toolbox. A screwdriver, a magnifying glass, steady hands. The faint scrape of metal on metal echoed through the cabin. The ring resisted at first as if it knew what it was hiding. Then, click. The band split open along an invisible seam. Inside, nestled in a groove no wider than a fingernail, was a micro SD card, small enough to disappear in a drop of water. He stared at it, heart pounding. That tiny thing had burned down a woman's life. And maybe it was about to burn his, too. Jacob crossed the room, grabbed his old laptop from a shelf. The screen flickered to life, the machine whining like an old dog woken from sleep. He slid the card into a reader. For a moment, nothing happened. Then folders appeared, dozens of them, labeled with cold, sterile words, Project Clearstream, Toxic Waste Containment. Phase 2, Mortality Reports. He clicked one. The screen filled with spreadsheets, chemical analyses, scanned memos, and then photos. Black water bubbling out of cracked pipes. Dead fish floating belly up in a once clear river. A schoolyard fenced off with bright yellow tape. Children's shoes abandoned in the mud. Jacob's throat tightened. He kept scrolling. Then he froze. A date. 6 years ago. The same week his wife, Laura, died. He opened the report. It detailed a controlled chemical release in a rural containment zone. The coordinates his valley. The company had known. They'd known exactly what they were doing. He scrolled further, and a scanned signature appeared at the bottom of the page. Robert Pierce, Executive Director, Hale Energy. Anna's father. Jacob leaned back, every muscle trembling. The world blurred around him. He could hear his wife's laugh somewhere in memory, faint as the wind through the trees. Then it shifted, Ben's voice, small and sleepy, from the next room. Dad Jacob wiped his face quickly. "Hey, buddy, go back to bed." Ben shuffled closer, rubbing his eyes. "You're crying." "No, just tired." The boy looked at the laptop screen, frowning at the images. "What's that nothing you need to see?" Jacob closed it gently. "It's late." Ben hesitated. "Is that lady coming back?" Jacob's jaw tightened. "I don't know. She looks scared," Ben said. "But nice." "Yeah," Jacob whispered. She was. When Ben went back to bed, Jacob stared at the closed laptop, the truth sitting inside like a loaded gun. His wife had died because of this. Anna had risked her life to bring it to light. He could go to the police, but who could he trust? Hale Energy's fingerprints were everywhere. He needed someone outside the system, someone who'd listen. Jacob picked up the phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in years. "Mac's garage," a voice answered, gruff and familiar. "Mac, it's Jacob." A pause. "Well, I'll be damned. You still breathing?" "Barely. What's wrong?" "I found something. I need your help. You sound like a man about to do something stupid." Jacob looked down at the ring. "Maybe I am." An hour later, he drove through the sleeping town. Every window seemed to watch him. The streets were slick with leftover rain streetlights reflecting off puddles like open eyes. Mac lived on the edge of town behind an old gas station that hadn't sold a drop in years. The garage door creaked open as Jacob pulled up. Mac was there, gray, beard oil-stained hands, eyes that had seen too much and believed too little. "You look worse than my carburetor," Mac muttered. "What the hell happened?" Jacob handed him the ring. "I need you to look at this." Mac turned it over. "Fancy jewelry." "Not jewelry. There's a chip inside. Corporate data. Proof. Hale Energy poisoned our valley." Mac's brows shot up. "You serious, dead serious?" They walked into the workshop. Tools clinked. The smell of grease and iron filled the air. Jacob handed him the laptop. "I need you to see what's on here." Mac slid his glasses down his nose, clicked through the files. His face went pale. "Jesus, you realize what this means?" Jacob nodded. They lied, Mac. About everything. Laura's death, the cleanup. All of it. Mac closed the laptop slowly. "If this gets out, Hale Energy's done. That's the plan." Mac exhaled. "You'll need help. Someone who can get this to the right people." "I'll find them," Jacob said. "Be careful who you trust," Mac warned. "The moment you move, they'll know." Jacob slipped the ring back into his pocket. "They already do?" Outside, thunder rumbled again, far away but coming closer. He could feel the storm rebuilding the air, thick with the scent of oil and ozone. As he turned to leave, Mac called after him. "Hey, Jake." Jacob looked back. Mac's eyes softened. "You've been quiet too long, brother. Maybe it's time someone finally made noise." Jacob nodded, stepping into the rain. He drove home in silence, the road slick beneath his tires. In the distance, lightning split the horizon like a warning. When he reached his cabin, the door was ajar. He froze. The lights inside flickered. The air smelled of gasoline. Then came the softest sound, the crackle of fire beginning to breathe. Jacob's heart slammed against his ribs. He ran for Ben's room. The boy was there, coughing, eyes wide with terror. Smoke curled along the ceiling. Jacob scooped him up, sprinted for the door just as the flames roared to life. Behind them, the cabin exploded into light. Ben clung to him, crying. "Dad, I've got you," Jacob gasped. "I've got you." They stumbled into the rain, both shaking, both alive. The fire devoured everything behind them, the walls, the memories, the truth he'd just uncovered. But the ring was still in his hand, and this time he wasn't letting it go. The fire burned through the night, swallowing Jacob Miller's home until nothing remained but black ribs of timber and the stench of smoke. By sunrise, the world had already decided what it thought of him. On every screen, in every diner and living room, his face was there, caught mid-blink, grainy and distorted, standing in front of his burning cabin. Suspect in hiding the headlines read, "Local man linked to eco-terrorist." They didn't show Ben coughing in his arms. They didn't show the look in his eyes when he realized everything they owned was gone. The truth, as always, was quieter, and no one wanted to hear quiet. Jacob and Ben sat in the cab of Mac's old truck wrapped in blankets that smelled of gasoline and hope. The boy stared out the window as fire crews hosed down what used to be their life. "Dad," Ben whispered, "why would someone do that to us?" Jacob swallowed. His voice came out rough. "Because they're afraid. Of us, of what we know." Ben didn't answer. He just pressed closer to his father, eyes wide, watching their house disappear beneath gray smoke. Mac stood outside talking to a deputy. The man shook his head, then walked away with that same look Jacob had seen too often, the look of someone who's already decided guilt before hearing the story. Mac climbed back into the truck. "They're saying it was faulty wiring." Jacob laughed once bitterly. "Of course they are." "You can't stay here," Mac said. "The cops are sniffing around and half the town thinks you lit it yourself." Jacob's hands clenched on the wheel. "Let them think what they want. I know who did this." Mac glanced at him. "You still got that ring." Jacob patted the pocket of his jacket. "Right here. Then keep it close. That's your proof. And your curse." They drove toward the edge of town. People on porches turned to watch as the truck passed. Some whispered, others pointed. Jacob saw the curtains move in the diner window, his old customers pretending not to know him. At the gas station, someone had spray-painted "Trader" across the side of his mechanic sign. Each letter hit like a hammer. He pulled into a small parking lot behind an abandoned hardware store. Mac turned off the engine. "I can take the kid," Mac said. "Just for a few days. Keep him safe while you figure out your next move." Jacob hesitated. "He's all I've got left." "That's exactly why you need to let him go for now," Max said. "They'll use him to get to you. You know that." Jacob stared out at the horizon, the mist crawling through the pines. The thought of letting Ben out of his sight cut deeper than any fire ever could. But Mac was right. He turned to his son. "Ben, you're gonna stay with Uncle Mac for a bit, okay? Just until I fix this." Ben's eyes filled with tears. "But what if they come again?" "They won't," Jacob said softly. "And if they do, Mac knows what to do. I don't want you to go." Jacob leaned forward, pressing his forehead to his son's. "You're the strongest kid I know. I need you to be brave for me." The boy nodded, biting his lip hard enough to draw blood. He looked small and breakable in the dawn light. Jacob stepped out of the truck, closing the door before he could change his mind. He stood there a long time, watching Mac drive away, his son's face pressed against the window, disappearing into the fog. When the taillights vanished, the silence hit him like a blow. The next day, Jacob walked into town. The morning paper lay in the newsstand, Mechanic hides corporate whistleblower, arson suspected. His picture again, eyes shadowed, mouth tight. He heard the whispers as he passed. "That's him. Should have locked him up already. Bet he's guilty as sin. He kept walking, hands in his pockets, eyes straight ahead. Inside the grocery store, the clerk refused to meet his gaze. "We're closed," she said, though the lights were on and customers were inside. Outside, a teenage boy on a bike shouted, "Hey, terrorist," and threw a rock that bounced off the pavement near Jacob's feet. Laughter followed. He didn't react. He just kept moving. Each step heavier than the last. The whole town, people he'd fixed cars for shared beers with, had turned their backs in a single day. That was the power of fear. It made strangers out of neighbors. By dusk, he was back at the burned-out remains of his cabin. The air still smelled like melted plastic and memory. Ash stuck to his boots. He stood there staring at the ruins, and for the first time he felt something shift inside him. Grief had burned away, leaving only clarity. They wanted to bury the truth. Fine. But he was done running. He pulled the ring from his pocket, holding it up against the fading light. The tiny emblem caught the sunset and gleamed like a promise. Anna's voice echoed in his head. "If they find me, they'll erase you too." She was right, and they'd already started. Jacob turned toward the woods. Somewhere beyond those trees, Anna was either dead or still fighting. And if she was alive, she was counting on him. That night, he stayed at a cheap roadside motel, the kind that smelled like bleach and regret. He sat on the edge of the bed, watching static on the television until the noise felt like company. A knock rattled the door. He froze. Another knock. Softer. 3 times. The same pattern he'd heard that first night in the rain. Jacob's pulse quickened. He reached for the bedside drawer where the motel kept a rusted Bible and a revolver that wasn't there. "Who is it?" he called. No answer. He opened the door a crack and saw no one. Just a plain envelope taped to the frame. His name written in neat handwriting. He tore it open. Inside was a single line written in smudged pencil. "If you want to finish what she started, come to the place where the river bends." No signature. No map. But he knew that spot, the curve of the river where Laura used to take Ben fishing. He looked back at the burned horizon, smoke still rising faintly into the night. For the first time since the world had turned against him, Jacob smiled a hard, tired smile, but real. The storm wasn't over, but now he finally had a direction. He slipped the ring back into his pocket and whispered to the dark, "You can burn everything I own, but you won't bury the truth." Then he stepped out into the night toward the river, toward whatever waited for him next. The river bend was shrouded in fog when Jacob arrived. The moon hung low, bleeding silver across the black water. He killed the truck's engine and sat in the dark, listening to the slow current lap against the shore. Somewhere far off, a night bird called a lonely sound like memory itself, refusing to sleep. This was Laura's place. He could almost see her there again, kneeling with Ben at the edge, teaching him to skip stones. The past flickered like light through water, beautiful, unreachable, gone. He stepped out, boots sinking into the wet soil. A faint glimmer caught his eye near the old willow tree, a small tin box half buried in the mud. He knelt, wiped it clean, and opened it. Inside was a folded letter sealed in plastic, written in a hand he instantly recognized. Anna Pierce. Jacob's heart pounded as he broke the seal. Her handwriting was hurried but deliberate, each stroke heavy with exhaustion. "Jacob, if you're reading this, I didn't make it out. They've taken me. Don't look for me, not yet. The files in the ring, they're more than proof. They're a map. It shows where the waste was buried, who signed off, who got paid to stay quiet. My father's name is on every page. They'll destroy you if they know you have it. But if anyone can finish this, it's you. Do what's right, not what's safe." The letter ended with 3 words underlined twice. Trust the river. He stared at them until the ink blurred in his vision. Then he folded the letter, slipped it inside his jacket, and sat down hard on the cold ground. The night pressed in. The sound of the river grew louder, like it understood every thought he couldn't say aloud. "Why me?" he whispered. "Why now?" No answer came, just the endless rhythm of water, steady and merciless. Then headlights appeared across the bend, brief, slicing through the mist. Jacob ducked behind the tree pulse racing. The lights moved slowly, scanning the shore, then faded away. Whoever had left that message wasn't alone. He waited until the silence returned before heading back toward the truck. His mind burned with the single truth: Anna was alive, or had been when she wrote that letter, and she'd trusted him to finish what she started. By morning, word of the fire had spread beyond the valley. National outlets now carried his name alongside hers. The two faces appeared side by side, fugitive journalist and accomplice mechanic, a dangerous alliance. He watched the report on a flickering motel television. The anchor's tone was clean and practiced, the kind that turned tragedy into entertainment. Authorities confirm Anna Pierce is now in federal custody. Charges include espionage, theft of classified corporate data, and conspiracy. A second individual, Jacob Miller, remains at large. Jacob shut the TV off. His hands trembled not from fear, but from rage. He looked down at the ring again. A map she'd written. Not just data, a map. He turned it over, pressed the hidden latch once more. This time he noticed a faint series of engraved dots along the inner rim coordinates, each set separated by dashes. He scribbled them down on the motel notepad. The pattern stretched across multiple locations along the Oregon Valley chemical sites, water treatment plants, even the old factory where Laura had worked before she died. Jacob felt his breath catch. The ring wasn't just a vault, it was a confession etched in gold. He grabbed his keys, but before he could leave, his phone buzzed. An unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. A woman's voice, quiet, urgent. "Mr. Miller. This is Nora Hayes. I'm a journalist, independent. I saw your interview with CNN before they buried it." "I didn't give an interview." "Exactly," she said. "They used footage from your old DMV record. The narrative's being written without you, Jacob. I think you have something they're trying to erase." He said nothing. "I can help you tell the truth," she continued. "Meet me tonight. There's a diner just off Highway 26, the Iron Creek. Back booth, no cameras. Why should I trust you? Because I don't work for them. And because if you don't speak soon, they'll make sure no one ever hears your side." The line went dead. Jacob sat there, phone still in his hand. Outside, thunder rolled again. He didn't have time to wonder. He tucked the ring into his jacket and drove. The diner was nearly empty when he arrived. A neon sign flickered over the door, buzzing faintly like a tired heartbeat. Inside, the air smelled of coffee grease and rain-soaked asphalt. She was already there, a woman in her 30s, sharp eyes, worn leather jacket, the kind of face that had seen too much truth to be surprised by it anymore. "Nora Hayes?" he asked. She nodded. "You look like a man who hasn't slept in a while." "Do you believe her?" he asked, sliding into the booth. "Anna Pierce, I believed her before she vanished," Nora said. "She reached out months ago, tried to give me the story, but I hesitated. I thought it was too big." Jacob studied her. "And now it's too dangerous not to tell." He placed the ring on the table. "This is what she died for." Nora's breath caught. "You found it. Inside coordinates files, reports. Proof that Hale Energy's been dumping waste across the entire region. My wife, she was one of their cleanup workers. They killed her with what they spilled." Nora's eyes softened. "Then let's finish what she started." Jacob shook his head. "They'll come for anyone who touches this." "They already have," she said quietly. "They burned your house. They smeared your name. What else can they take?" For a moment, the only sound was the hum of the diner lights. Then Jacob leaned forward. "If we do this, it's not about revenge. It's about truth. People need to know." Nora nodded. "Agreed, but we'll need reach. Network sources back up. CNN won't touch this unless it's undeniable." "I can make it undeniable," Jacob said. "The files in that ring are enough to bring them down." "Then we move fast," she said. "Tomorrow I'll arrange a live feed. You tell your story. The world will hear it from your voice, not theirs." He exhaled slowly. "And if Anna's still alive?" Nora hesitated. "If she's in federal custody, she's a bargaining chip. But your testimony could force them to release her." Jacob looked at the window. The storm outside was growing again, thunder crawling across the horizon. He picked up the ring, rolling it between his fingers. "She told me to do the right thing." "And you will," Nora said. He nodded more to himself than to her. "Then tomorrow we burn their lies to the ground." Outside, the lightning flashed bright enough to turn the world white for a moment. And somewhere deep in the government's archives, a camera feed flickered showing a woman in a gray cell staring at the same storm through a narrow slit of glass. Anna Pierce whispered to herself, "Hold on, Jacob." Morning came gray and restless. The world outside the diner felt colder, like the storm had left its chill inside the bones of the town. Jacob and Nora sat in her old Jeep at the edge of the highway, coffee cooling between them, the ring gleaming faintly in Jacob's palm. The air smelled of damp pine and diesel. A new day, but it carried the same weight as the last. "You sure you're ready for this?" Nora asked. Jacob looked out at the mountains. "I lost everything already. What's left to be ready for?" She studied him, his unshaven face, the lines carved deep by grief and resolve. "You talk like a man with nothing left to lose." He turned to her, voice steady. "That's exactly what I am." She nodded, then started the engine. "Let's go make some noise." They drove north toward Portland. Along the way, Nora made calls, reporters she trusted, editors who still believed in truth more than headlines. Most didn't pick up. A few hung up. One or two agreed to listen. Jacob sat quietly, his fingers brushing the ring in his pocket, the engraved dots like braille on his fingertips. He thought about Laura's laugh, Ben's small hands gripping his Anna's trembling voice, whispering, "If they find me, you and your son are in danger." She had been right about everything, and now she was paying for it. 300 miles away, Anna Pierce sat in a concrete cell lit by a single buzzing fluorescent light. Her wrists were chained to the table in front of her. Her reflection in the metal surface looked like someone else's tired, pale hair tangled from days without sleep. The door opened with a metallic clang. 2 guards stepped aside and Robert Pierce entered. His suit was immaculate, his voice calm like a man walking into a board meeting instead of a prison. "Hello, Anna," he said, closing the door behind him. Her jaw tightened. "Don't call me that. You're still my daughter. Not anymore." He sat across from her, folding his hands neatly. "You've made quite a mess." Anna's laugh came out cracked and dry. Truth tends to do that. "You think what you did was noble," he said. "But all you've done is expose people who gave you everything. You poisoned them," she snapped. "You killed families, children for profit. You buried it under contracts and signatures. You buried her." His eyes hardened. Laura Miller's death was unfortunate. Tragic, yes, but not criminal. That's what the report said. Anna slammed her hands on the table. The cuffs rattled. "You wrote those reports." Robert leaned forward, lowering his voice. "And I can erase them. I can make this all disappear. All you have to do is tell me where the ring is." Anna stared at him, fury and heartbreak warring in her eyes. "You'll have to kill me first." He sighed, stood and smoothed his tie. "Don't be dramatic, Anna. The world doesn't care about your idealism. You'll learn that soon enough." He turned to leave, but she called after him, voice trembling. "The world may not care, but he does." Robert paused. "He Jacob Miller," she said. "The man you called collateral damage." For the first time, her father's mask cracked. "You gave it to him." Anna smiled through tears. "He's everything you're not. He won't stop." Robert's voice dropped to a whisper. "Then neither will I." Back on the road, Nora pulled off at a small rest stop overlooking the valley. "There's an independent newsroom in the city that'll take us," she said. "They're small, but fearless. We can go live broadcast everything." Jacob nodded. His mind was already racing ahead, picturing the files, the proof, the map of buried waste. Once the public sees what they've done, Hale Energy won't survive the week. Maybe she said, but they'll come after you before that happens. He looked out the window. Let them. She hesitated. You're risking your life. He turned to her voice, quiet but fierce. So was she. By afternoon, they reached Portland. Nora's contact, a young producer named Eric, met them in an underground parking garage. He looked nervous, glancing over his shoulder as he led them upstairs to a dim, cluttered studio filled with screens and cables. This is off the grid, he said. No corporate backing. We stream everything live. If you've got something worth seeing, we'll put it out there. Jacob handed him the ring. Everything you need is in this. Eric examined it, eyes widening. How did you never mind? Let's get this started. As they set up the cameras, Nora pulled Jacob aside. When this goes live, there's no undoing it. You'll be hunted. He nodded. Truth usually is. The lights warmed his face. The microphone hummed to life. Eric gave a thumbs up. We're rolling in 3, 2, 1. Jacob took a breath, feeling the weight of the moment. His heart hammered, but his voice came out steady. My name is Jacob Miller, he began. I'm a mechanic from a small town in Oregon. I'm not a politician. I'm not a criminal. I'm a father. And I'm here because the people who poisoned our rivers told us it was rain. He paused, staring straight into the lens. My wife died cleaning up their mess. They called it an accident. I believed them until a woman named Anna Pierce knocked on my door. He told the story, the storm, the ring, the files. Every word was raw, unscripted, alive. Behind him, Nora watched with tears in her eyes. Jacob ended with a simple plea. We deserve clean water. We deserve truth. And if I disappear after this, let that be proof enough of who's guilty. Eric hit send. The stream went live. For a few heartbeats, there was only silence. Then the comments began to flood in. Messages from strangers, from parents, from survivors. The story was spreading faster than Hale Energy could bury it. Far away in a secure facility, a guard rushed into Robert Pierce's office. Sir, you need to see this. On the screen, Jacob's face filled the feed, tired, resolute, unbroken. Robert's expression darkened. Cut it. Sir, it's everywhere. CNN, Twitter. YouTube, people are sharing it faster than we can contain it. Robert slammed his fist against the desk. In the cell below, Anna heard the commotion. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself a small, trembling smile. He did it, she whispered. The guard watching her frowned. What? She looked up, eyes shining. He answered the call. The world changed in less than an hour. Jacob's voice, raw, trembling but unwavering, spilled across the screens of 1,000 homes. It wasn't the kind of voice people expected from a whistleblower. It was quieter, more human. The voice of a man who'd carried loss long enough to recognize truth when it bled. They told us the water was safe, he'd said. But my wife's lungs turned black from cleaning it. They said it was an accident. It wasn't. It was greed. And then he'd shown the files, the blueprints, the memos, the corporate signatures. Within minutes, the clip was everywhere. Independent outlets picked it up first, then national ones. Hashtags filled every feed. People shared it not because it was scandalous, but because it was real. In small towns and big cities, families watched him speak and felt something rare recognition. Nora's phone buzzed non-stop. We're trending in 47 states, she said, half laughing, half crying. It's Jacob, this thing's going nuclear. He sat in silence, staring at the dim studio lights. Good, he said quietly. Maybe now someone will listen. But even as the world woke up, danger closed in. A black SUV rolled to a stop outside the building. Men in suits stepped out, earpieces glinting under the rain. One spoke into his radio. Confirmed. Miller's inside. Eric, the young producer, looked up at the monitor feed from the security cam. His face drained of color. "We've got company." Nora's voice dropped to a whisper. "Jacob, we have to go. Now." Jacob stood slowly. "Let it keep running. If they shut us down, make sure the backup stream stays live." Eric nodded, hand shaking as he switched the feed to a mirrored cloud drive. "Already done." The lights flickered once, then twice. The hum of the building changed a deep electric growl. Someone had cut the power grid. They slipped out the back door into the rain-soaked alley. The air smelled of oil and thunder. Nora led the way, her coat pulled tight, her voice steady, only because it had to be. "They'll try to spin this," she said. "Say you fabricated it, that the files were stolen, that you're unstable." Jacob almost smiled. "They already said that, but people heard me this time." She glanced over her shoulder. "Yeah, they did." Behind them, the studio lights went dark. Hours later, the story had reached Washington. The White House press secretary, cornered by questions, promised an urgent review of environmental practices. CNN replayed Jacob's broadcast on loop. Commentators argued over his credibility, but one image silenced the noise: the photograph of Laura Miller standing ankle-deep in polluted water, smiling through a mask she thought was protecting her. In living rooms across the country, people saw her face and understood she wasn't a symbol. She was someone's wife, someone's mother. That was the moment the protests began. It started small, a few dozen people outside Hale Energy headquarters in Seattle. Then hundreds. Then thousands. Signs rose like a tidewater as life justice for the Millers' clean truth. Meanwhile, inside a windowless interrogation room, Anna Pierce heard the news from the guard's radio. She sat still as the words filtered through the static. Nationwide protests. Corporate scandal. Investigation launched against Hale Energy executives. Her lips parted in disbelief. Then she smiled, the first true smile in weeks. "He did it," she whispered. The door burst open. Her father, Robert Pierce, strode in, his composure cracking. "What did you do?" he demanded. Anna's voice was calm. "You wanted silence." He gave the world a voice. "You have no idea what this will cost," he shouted. "Yes, I do," she said softly. "Everything. And that's why it matters." Robert slammed his hand on the table. "I built this empire to protect our name." Anna met his gaze. "You built it on poison." He leaned closer, eyes cold. "Do you think the public will save you? They'll forget you by next week." She tilted her head. "Maybe. But they'll remember him." Back in Portland, Nora and Jacob holed up in an old safe house that once belonged to an investigative network. It was small, windowless, and reeked of mildew, but it had power and Wi-Fi, and that was enough. Jacob sat at the table watching the flood of messages roll in. People from across the country sent stories, photos, pleas. A mother whose son had gotten sick from the contaminated river. A fisherman who hadn't caught a living fish in years. A janitor who'd been fired for asking questions. "This isn't just my story," Jacob said, his voice hoarse. "It's everyone's." Nora looked at him, weary but proud. "You lit a match in the dark, Jacob. Now the whole world's seeing the fire." He stared down at his hands, cracked, rough-stained from years of engine oil and loss. "I never wanted to be a hero. I just wanted my son to grow up without fear." And now, she said softly, he'll grow up in a world that remembers what courage looks like. The following morning, the protests grew violent. Police clashed with crowds. Smoke filled the streets of Seattle. Buildings shuttered their doors. Nora scrolled through the live feeds, voice tight. They're calling it the water war. Congress just announced a full investigation. Hale Energy's stock dropped 40% overnight. Jacob rubbed his temples. "They're fighting back harder. They always do before they fall," she said. A knock came at the door, 3 short raps. Jacob froze. That pattern. Nora tensed. What he stood, walked to the door and opened it. A woman stood there, wrapped in a gray prison blanket, hair matted from rain. Her wrists were bruised, her face pale but alive. Anna Jacob breathed. She looked up at him, eyes wet. "They released me," she whispered. The broadcast forced their hand. Nora stepped back in shock. "How did you—" "They needed to save face," Anna said, voice trembling. "But they'll come again, once the cameras turn away." Jacob reached out, touching her shoulder as if afraid she'd vanish. "You made it?" Anna looked around the dim room, then back at him. "No," she said softly. "We made it." For a long moment, none of them spoke. The storm outside eased to a drizzle, tapping gently against the window pane like a heart finally slowing down. Jacob felt a tightness in his chest he hadn't known he'd been holding. Relief, grief, hope, all tangled together. Anna's gaze met his. "You gave them the truth, Jacob. You gave me something I thought I'd lost faith." He shook his head. "You gave me the same." Nora turned from the window phone, buzzing again. "Jacob, you need to see this." She handed him the screen. The live feed showed crowds gathered outside the Capitol steps chanting his name. Reporters swarmed. Headlines scrolled, "Congress opens emergency hearings, Hale Energy under federal investigation." Anna exhaled shakily. "It's happening." Jacob looked out at the storm clouds breaking apart, light spilling through like a promise. "It's just beginning." But even as hope spread, danger shadowed it. In a boardroom high above the city, Robert Pierce stood before his executives, his face hard as steel. "They think this is over," he said. "They're wrong." He turned to his aide. "Prepare the damage control team. And find him. I don't care what it costs." The aide nodded. And the girl, Robert's eyes burned. "Bring her back." Outside, thunder rolled again, faint but steady. The storm wasn't done yet. The courthouse smelled of rain-soaked marble and fear. Outside, crowds gathered under gray skies, clutching signs that read, "Justice for the Millers" and "Clean Water, Clean Truth." News vans lined the street, their cameras like hungry eyes waiting for a headline that would finally break the silence. Inside, the air was heavy. Reporters whispered. Lawyers shuffled papers. Security guards stood like statues. At the center of it all sat Jacob Miller, the mechanic who had turned the nation's conscience inside out. He adjusted his tie, the only one he owned, and glanced across the courtroom. Anna sat beside him, her wrists still faintly bruised, her expression calm but unreadable. Between them lay the ring sealed in a glass case, its golden band now a symbol too heavy for words. When the judge entered, everyone rose. The gavel struck once. Silence fell like a blade. "This hearing will come to order," the judge said. "We are here to address allegations of corporate negligence, environmental destruction, and obstruction of justice involving Hale Energy Incorporated." Jacob swallowed hard. His palms were damp. He'd worked with his hands his whole life, fixing broken engines and rusted tools. But now, his hands were the instruments of something far larger, something he barely understood. Anna leaned closer, her voice low. "Breathe, Jacob. Just tell the truth." He nodded, eyes fixed on the polished floor. "Truth. That's all I have left." The first witness was called a woman named Lydia Monroe, former plant supervisor for Hale Energy. Her voice trembled as she described falsified reports barrels buried under cover of night and orders signed by top executives. Then came the files, each one projected on the massive screen at the front of the court. Emails, contracts, signatures. The audience gasped when Robert Pierce's name appeared over and over again. Anna stared at the screen, her knuckles white. Every line of text was a ghost she'd been living with for years. Finally, the prosecutor spoke. "Mr. Pierce, as CEO of Hale Energy, do you deny that your company knowingly contaminated the Columbia River waterway for profit?" Robert stood immaculate in his dark suit, his tone icy. "I deny the accusation entirely. My daughter—" He gestured toward Anna, stole those files in an act of personal revenge. "She has always been unstable." Anna's breath caught. Unstable, she muttered under her breath. Jacob whispered, "Let it go." But she couldn't. She rose to her feet. Permission to speak. "Your Honor." The judge hesitated. "You're not on the witness stand yet, Miss Pierce. Then put me there," she said, voice shaking, but sure, "because I'm done hiding." Minutes later, she took the stand. The courtroom leaned forward as if the entire country held its breath. Anna clasped her hands together and began. "My name is Anna Pierce. I'm a journalist, and I am the daughter of Robert Pierce, CEO of Hale Energy. I came across internal reports showing that my father's company dumped thousands of gallons of chemical waste into protected rivers. When I tried to publish the truth, he silenced me, had me branded a criminal." Robert's jaw tightened, but she didn't stop. "I didn't steal those files," she said. "I rescued them, because the people dying in our towns deserve better than corporate lies and political cover-ups. They deserve to live." The prosecutor leaned in. "Ms. Pierce, what evidence do you have that your father personally authorized these acts?" Anna's voice wavered, but held firm. "That ring." Gasps rippled through the room. "The ring you see there," she said, pointing to the glass case, "was my father's. He had it custom-made when the first pipeline opened. He wore it to every board meeting, every signing ceremony. Inside, he engraved the coordinates of every dumping site. I copied the data, but I left the ring behind until the night I ran." She turned toward Jacob. "And when I couldn't run anymore, I left it with him." Robert shot to his feet. "Lies. This is emotional theater." But the judge raised a hand. "Mr. Pierce, sit down." On the screen, the coordinates appeared, each matched to government reports, satellite images, and leaked documents from whistleblowers who had come forward after Jacob's broadcast. The truth was undeniable now. Robert's defense unraveled in real time. He accused his daughter of manipulation, of weakness, of betrayal. But the more he spoke, the smaller he seemed, a man cracking under the weight of his own empire. Finally, the prosecutor stepped forward. "Mr. Pierce, would you care to explain why millions of dollars were transferred from Hale Energy's accounts to offshore entities under your name?" Robert's face went pale. Those funds were operational, classified. The prosecutor smiled thinly. "Classified as what bribes?" The room erupted in murmurs. For the first time, Robert faltered. His hands trembled. The image of the proud CEO began to crumble before everyone's eyes. Anna closed her eyes. "It's over," she thought. "It has to be." Jacob was called to the stand next. He took a deep breath and faced the court. "I'm not here to destroy anyone," he began. "I'm here because I buried my wife last spring. Her lungs were full of chemicals she never should have touched. We trusted the people who said our water was clean. We trusted them to protect us." He paused, his voice breaking. "All I did was open my door to a stranger in the rain, and she showed me that silence is the deadliest poison of all." There was no applause, no sound, just a profound, aching quiet. Even the judge looked away, blinking back emotion. The verdict came hours later. Robert Pierce was found guilty on multiple counts of corporate negligence, environmental destruction, and conspiracy to obstruct justice. When the gavel fell, the sound was sharp, final, echoing like thunder. Anna sat still, tears streaming silently. Jacob reached over, resting a hand on hers. "It's done," he whispered. She turned to him, voice soft. "No, Jacob. It's begun." Outside the courthouse, the crowds erupted, cheering, crying, chanting their names. The rain had stopped, replaced by sunlight breaking through heavy clouds. For the first time in years, the air smelled clean. As they stepped outside, camera flashes blinded them. Reporters shouted questions, but Jacob barely heard any of it. His eyes lifted toward the horizon where a pale beam of sunlight cut through the mist. Anna followed his gaze. "Do you think it'll last?" she asked quietly. Jacob smiled faintly. "Light always does. Eventually." They walked down the courthouse steps together, two weary souls side by side, while behind them the bells of justice rang out across the city. The morning light in Clearwater Valley felt different that day, gentler, fuller, as if the air itself was finally at peace. A year had passed since the storm that changed everything. The scandals, the hearings, the noise, all of it had faded into memory, leaving behind a silence that wasn't empty, but earned. Jacob Miller stood by the old well behind his rebuilt cabin. The wooden frame still smelled faintly of ash, but now it was surrounded by wildflowers and the low hum of bees. His hands were rough but steady. He looked down into the water, clear alive, reflecting the wide Oregon sky above. He wasn't alone. Anna Pierce was kneeling beside him, her hair pulled back her clothes, dusty from work. Together, they had spent months helping the town restore what the company had taken. A new filtration system, fresh wells, clean water for everyone. "This one's done," Anna said, brushing dirt from her palms. Her voice carried a quiet pride. "The people can drink from it tomorrow." Jacob smiled faintly. "Feels right, doesn't it?" Anna nodded, looking into the well. "Clean water. It's more than just water, isn't it?" He followed her gaze. "It's the difference between who we were and who we chose to become." Between them on the ground lay the gold ring, the one that had started it all. The same ring Anna had worn the night she knocked on his door, soaked and trembling. It had been a key, a secret, a confession, and now it was just a symbol of everything they'd survived. Anna picked it up, turning it between her fingers. "This little thing destroyed so many lives," she whispered. "It feels wrong to keep it." Jacob looked at her, his voice low. "Then let's give it back to the earth. Let it rest where it can't hurt anyone anymore." Anna smiled softly. "You mean bury it?" He shook his head. "No, I mean cleanse it." Together they knelt by the well. Jacob held her hand as she dropped the ring into the water. It hit the surface with a faint plink, a sound so delicate it almost disappeared beneath the quiet morning. Ripples spread outward, catching the light. For a moment, the sunlight shimmered across the water like gold dust, then settled into stillness. Anna exhaled slowly. "It's strange," she murmured. "How something so small could carry so much weight." Jacob's voice was gentle. "The weight isn't in the metal. It's in the memories we give it. They stayed like that for a while, two people on the edge of something that once broke them, now finding peace in its reflection. Later that afternoon, they sat by the lake behind the cabin. Ben was there too, crouched near the water, putting the finishing touches on his small wooden airplane. The soft sound of sandpaper, the light crackle of the wind through the pines, the distant call of a loon. It was all part of the rhythm of a life rebuilt. Anna watched Ben for a moment and smiled. "He's so much like you," she said. Jacob laughed quietly. "You mean stubborn? I mean strong," she corrected. "He sees the world the way you do, broken, but worth fixing." Jacob looked at her, his expression tender. "You helped with that. He still talks about you, you know." Anna blushed faintly. "I'm not sure that's a good thing." "It is," Jacob said. "You showed him that heroes don't wear capes. They tell the truth, even when it costs them everything." Her eyes softened. "I wasn't trying to be a hero." "Neither was I," Jacob replied. "But somehow, here we are." Ben finished his plane and stood up proudly. Ready to see it fly, Jacob grinned. "Let's see what you've got, champ." Ben wound the propeller, took a few steps forward, and released. The plane soared into the golden air, catching a current of wind that carried it far out over the lake. For a moment it seemed weightless, gliding with a grace that defied logic. Then gently it landed on the water, floating like a promise. Anna laughed softly. "He's getting better." Jacob nodded. "Yeah, maybe we all are." Ben turned to them, his eyes bright. "Mom would have liked this one, huh?" Jacob swallowed hard. "Yeah, buddy," he said. "She would have loved it." For a heartbeat the wind stilled. The sound of the lake, the whisper of the trees, it all felt like an echo of Laura's presence. She wasn't gone. She had simply changed form. She was in the light and the laughter and every drop of clean water that flowed because of what they'd done. Anna placed a hand on Jacob's arm. "She'd be proud of you." He nodded, his voice low. "I hope so. Took me a long time to believe I deserved peace." "You do," Anna said firmly. "We both do." As twilight approached, the sky melted into shades of rose and silver. The air cooled, carrying the scent of pine and rain-soaked earth. Ben had fallen asleep on the dock, his small hand still gripping the plane. Anna and Jacob sat beside him, legs dangling over the water. The lake mirrored the first stars of the night. "You ever think about what's next?" Anna asked. Jacob thought for a moment. "Not really. For once, I think I'm okay with now." She smiled. "Now. That's a good place to be." He turned toward her. "You could stay, you know. The spare room's still yours." Anna looked at him, then out across the water. "Tempting. But I think some doors we only knock on once. You opened yours that night, and maybe that was enough to change everything." Jacob nodded slowly. "You'll come back, though, right?" She smiled. "You'll see me again. Maybe not soon, but you will." She stood brushing off her jeans. He rose with her. They shared a quiet look, a goodbye that didn't need words. She walked up the path toward her car. The engine started, headlights cutting through the trees, then faded into the distance. Jacob stood there for a long time, hands in his pockets, listening to the water lapping softly against the dock. He turned to the well on the hill. Moonlight shimmered across its surface, catching the ripples like 1,000 tiny lanterns. He whispered, "We're going to be okay, kid." The world answered with silence, but it was the kind of silence that heals. And as he sat there, the first drops of night dew began to fall, cool, clean, pure. The air smelled like renewal. From the well, the faint sound of trickling water echoed through the valley, soft and steady like the heartbeat of something reborn. Jacob closed his eyes and breathed deeply. After years of storms, there was finally light. And for the first time, it wasn't just shining on them. It was shining through them. And that was Single Dad and the Soaked Traveler. A story not just about one man and one storm, but about all of us who've ever faced darkness and still chosen to open the door. Because sometimes redemption doesn't come roaring like thunder. It comes quietly in the shape of a helping hand, a word of truth, or a stranger who reminds us that kindness still exists. Jacob's story is a reminder that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what's right even when the whole world turns against you. That healing doesn't mean forgetting the pain. It means finding meaning within it. And that love in all its forms is the only thing powerful enough to rebuild what's been broken. Now I want to hear your story. Have you ever faced a moment that tested your faith in people? Or restored it? Have you ever met someone who changed your life when you least expected it? Maybe it was a single act of kindness, or a truth that set you free. If you have, share it in the comments below. Tell me where you're listening from, whether it's a quiet kitchen in Ohio, a small apartment in New York, or somewhere halfway across the world. Because this channel isn't just about stories I tell, it's about stories we share. And together we keep the flame of hope alive for someone who might need it tonight. If this story moved you, if it made you feel something real, please don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. It's the easiest way to make sure you don't miss the next story that might just touch your heart the same way, and if you believe that kindness still matters, help this story travel further. Share it with someone you care about. You never know whose storm it might calm. Thank you truly for spending your time, your heart, and your attention here with me. Until next time, take care of yourself. And remember, even after the hardest storms, there is always light waiting to be found.